They tell you forgiveness is divine, but divinity is for the dead. The living don't have that luxury. The living must remember, adapt, and strike. Look around. Empires don't fall because of their enemies' swords. They fall because of soft hearts. Because kings forgive too quickly, and men trust too easily. A prince who forgives his betrayers invites new ones. A man who forgets his wounds guarantees they'll be opened again. So let the preachers speak of forgiveness to keep the masses tame. But if you're wise, if you're a strategist, a survivor, you remember everything. Memory isn't bitterness, it's armor. Every scar is a map. Every betrayal, a lesson written in blood. If you forgive without calculation, you hand over your advantage. You tell your enemies, "Do it again, I won't stop you." And they will. The man who forgives once will always be tested twice. But the man who remembers, he's feared. Because he doesn't move from emotion, he moves from consequence. Smile if you must. Shake their hand. Even embrace them if it keeps your plans intact. But carve their name into your mind. Not to act in rage, but to strike with precision when the moment is perfect. That is power. That is Machiavellian. Vengeance isn't fury, it's balance. Forgiveness isn't freedom, it's surrender. The one who remembers doesn't live in pain. He lives in preparation. And in life, in politics, in war, preparation is everything. What kind of fool returns to the mouth that once bit him and calls it healing? No, the wise man studies the beast that hurt him. He learns its hunger. He builds weapons in silence. He doesn't post his pain. He polishes it into steel. You must become that kind of man, a fox to detect traps. A lion to terrify wolves. Forgiveness removes the teeth of both. If your enemies believe they can wound you without cost, then you're not feared, you're forgotten. And forgettable men never hold power. The greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's resurrection. It's rising so high that your name becomes a quiet thunder in the hearts of those who wronged you. That is the reward of memory. Write nothing in sand, inscribe it in stone. Because the world forgets the kind, but it never forgets the calculating. And when your enemies finally whisper your name again, it will not be in hatred, it will be in fear. They'll call you cruel. They'll call you cold. But understand, those are the words of the guilty. They fear your memory because it exposes them. Forgiveness may soothe your heart, but memory arms your mind. And in this world, the mind wins battles the heart cannot survive. Remember who smiled when you fell. Remember who clapped when you lost. Not to hate them, but to ensure they never have another chance. In politics, a second chance is a second opportunity to be destroyed. And life works the same way. They'll dress their guilt in flowers. They'll call you heartless for remembering. Let them. Your calm makes them uneasy. Your silence makes them squirm. That's good. It means you're dangerous now. Forgiveness is for saints, and saints die for others. You are not here to die. You are here to rule, to build, to dominate. For that, you need memory, unforgiving, and unapologetic. And when your moment comes, when your throne is built and their shields are down, you deliver justice without emotion, with elegance, quietly, and never speak of it again. That is how power moves. Because real strength is never loud, it's remembered. A man who remembers never needs to chase revenge. He becomes it. His presence, his silence, his success. They're not coincidences. They're executions. So remember this. People don't fear punishment. They fear consequence. And nothing creates consequence like a man with perfect memory. People will test you again and again, Every time you forgive too easily, you train them to hurt you deeper next time. Betrayal doesn't always roar. It arrives in inches, in jokes, in subtle disrespect. And if you forgive them, you teach them that betrayal is cheap. So keep a ledger, quietly, calmly, and when the balance is due, collect with grace. That is the discipline of kings, because forgiveness is for the weak. And you remember everything. Here's the truth. People don't betray you by accident. They do it because they've studied you. They've measured your boundaries and found none. They've watched you forgive before, and they counted on it. Machiavelli warned us centuries ago, when you forgive too freely, you don't create loyalty. You create opportunity for manipulation. Your mercy becomes their strategy. And when kindness is predictable, it becomes a weapon against you. Never forget, betrayal is a teacher. Every cut is a lesson. The difference between a fool and a ruler is simple. The fool moves on, the ruler writes it down. The wise man doesn't replay the pain. He replays the pattern. He asks, "What weakness in me allowed this?" Because once you know that answer, you become untouchable. Forgiveness can make you feel noble for a day, but remembrance makes you powerful for a lifetime. Because the one who remembers doesn't live in bitterness, he lives in awareness. He learns, he adapts, he becomes the kind of person no one can surprise again. When you're too quick to forgive, you tell the world you're afraid of conflict. You tell them your peace matters more than your power. But Machiavelli would ask you, what is peace without security? What is virtue without defense? The man who forgives endlessly is not enlightened. He's unarmed. Understand this. The world respects boundaries, not benevolence. When you let things slide, you think you're keeping the peace. But what you're really doing is teaching others that there's no cost to crossing you. And once they learn that lesson, they'll never stop. So, what do you do instead? You remember, you study, you build a memory fortress inside your mind. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment someone made you doubt yourself, you store it. Not to relive it, but to never repeat it. Because power isn't about reacting, it's about knowing. The Machiavellian mind doesn't scream for revenge. It watches, it plans, it calculates. It understands that the most devastating retaliation isn't destruction, it's evolution. Rise so far above them that your silence becomes their punishment. Your growth becomes their reminder. Your name becomes the echo of their failure. That's true revenge, the kind that doesn't break you. It crowns you. Forgiveness may win you praise from the weak, but it wins you no respect from the powerful. The world doesn't admire saints, it forgets them. It admires the ones who learned, who evolved, who turned pain into precision. So stop calling it healing when you forget what hurt you. That's not healing, that's delusion. True healing is transformation. It's taking what was used to wound you and turning it into wisdom so sharp that no one can cut you the same way again. When they betray you, you don't need to curse them. You don't need to expose them. You just need to let time and your rise remind them of what they lost. Because when your throne grows higher, their apologies shrink to whispers. And here's the secret: they will come back. They always do. They'll cloak their guilt in kindness. They'll say, "You've changed," as if that's an insult. Smile when they say it, because they're right. You have changed. You've become someone who remembers. Forgiveness is emotional surrender disguised as virtue. It's a beautiful story told to keep strong minds docile, because the system wants you tame, predictable, polite. But Machiavelli's world and ours was never built for saints. It was built for strategists. You don't need to scream. You don't need to hate. You simply need to remember. Because when your memory becomes weaponized, you no longer chase justice. You are justice. You don't seek revenge. You embody consequence. And when your enemies look at you again, years later, and feel the chill of your silence, they'll understand. You didn't forgive them. You outgrew them. Machiavelli would call this the art of controlled remembrance. To forget nothing, but to act only when it serves your ascension. Because real power is never reactive, it's reserved. So remember this: every offense is data, every insult, evidence, every betrayal, a report from the enemy. The Machiavellian doesn't burn these records. He archives them. He studies them. He uses them to craft a future no one can infiltrate again. You don't forgive to move on. You move forward because you remember. And when they call you cold, smile. When they say you hold grudges, say nothing. Because the guilty will always label your clarity as cruelty. They need you to forget, because your memory is their mirror, but you're done giving them comfort. From now on, your silence is your verdict. Your discipline is your declaration. Because forgiveness is for the weak, and memory is for the rulers. Let's talk about the psychology behind this. People don't actually want forgiveness. They want forgetfulness. They want to erase accountability without ever earning redemption. That's why they'll tell you to let it go. Not for your peace, but for their comfort. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. In The Prince, he wrote that men are ungrateful, fickle, and deceitful. And he wasn't wrong. The same patterns echo today, only dressed in polite words and moral language. Modern betrayal doesn't come with swords and daggers. It comes with apologies, with smiles, with phrases like, "I didn't mean it," or, "Can't we just move on?" But the truth is, forgiveness without accountability isn't virtue, it's self-betrayal. You cannot protect your peace by surrendering your power. When you forgive without reflection, you destroy your record of human behavior. You erase the data that reveals how people operate, and that ignorance will cost you again and again until you learn to do what Machiavelli advised. Remember patterns, not promises. The world doesn't reward the innocent. It rewards the aware. The rulers of every era, kings, CEOs, generals, they didn't survive because they were merciful. They survived because they understood the cost of forgetting. Remember this: forgiveness is emotional relief. Remembrance is strategic foresight. When someone wrongs you, you must train yourself to observe instead of react. Step back, study them. Understand what motivated it: envy, insecurity, fear. Every betrayal reveals a truth about human nature. And if you miss that truth, you'll face the same lesson in a new disguise. Forgiveness may feel spiritual, but it blinds you to repetition. Machiavelli would call it mental disarmament. And when you're disarmed, your enemies don't need to destroy you. They just wait for you to destroy yourself with misplaced compassion. Think of how many times you've let the same person hurt you twice. How many times you've believed that an apology changed a nature. It didn't. It only changed your perception long enough for them to strike again. The wise don't forgive, they categorize. They classify every encounter like a general cataloging tactics used against him. Not out of hatred, but clarity. You cannot evolve from what you refuse to examine. There are two kinds of memory: one that traps you in the past, and one that turns the past into strategy. Choose the second. When you remember with precision, not emotion, you become immune to manipulation. Forgiveness wants you to erase what happened. Machiavellian remembrance asks you to refine it, to study every betrayal as a masterclass in human psychology. Because once you understand people's motivations, Their next move is never a surprise. And here's where your transformation begins. You stop being the victim. You stop chasing closure. You stop demanding explanations from people who already revealed themselves. You realize that silence is stronger than confrontation. Forgiveness demands closure. But Machiavelli would tell you, closure is a fantasy. Power is knowing when not to need it. Let them speak. Let them rewrite history. You don't need to correct them because history doesn't belong to those who talk the loudest. It belongs to those who outlast everyone else. Your job is not to make them understand your pain. Your job is to make sure that pain never repeats. You do that through discipline, through boundaries, through memory. Because the moment you forget, they remember their advantage. The moment you forgive too easily, you teach them your weakness. The Machiavellian doesn't seek revenge in blood. He seeks it in control of self, of information, of timing. Revenge, for him, is not retaliation. It's refinement. It's the quiet decision to become unreachable to those who once had access. They will call it arrogance. Let them. They will say you've changed. Good, that means your transformation is visible. You don't owe them humility when they've already cashed in your kindness. Machiavelli believed that every offense should be remembered, because every offense is proof of human nature's pattern. If you ignore it, you're not being noble. You're being predictable. And predictable people are pawns in the game of power. From now on, every wound you've taken is not something to resent. It's something to document. Who did it? Why did they think they could? What part of you made them believe they'd get away with it? Write it down. Study it. Let it evolve into wisdom. Because the day you stop doing that, the day you start forgiving without thinking, is the day you lose the game you never realized you were playing. Forgiveness makes you feel good for a moment. Memory makes you untouchable forever. So ask yourself, would you rather be peaceful or powerful? Would you rather be loved for your softness or respected for your silence? Machiavelli knew the answer. And if you remember this truth, so will you. The people who preach forgiveness will call you cold. They'll tell you that you hold grudges, that you're too harsh, too distant. But what they really mean is, you can't be manipulated anymore. When you stop forgiving so easily, you break a social rule. The rule that says everyone deserves a second chance, no matter what they did. But Machiavelli would laugh at that. He knew second chances don't reform the wicked, they empower them. He wrote that men must be either won over or destroyed, because half measures invite rebellion. In today's world, that translates to this: if you must deal with betrayal, deal with it completely. Don't forgive halfway. Don't forget partially. Don't allow those who wounded you to linger in your orbit under the illusion of peace. Your silence doesn't mean they're forgiven. It means you've outgrown the conversation. Your distance isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You no longer offer access to people who have already shown you their price, because that's what betrayal is. Revelation. A moment when someone shows you how cheap their loyalty really was. You don't need to punish that, you only need to remember it. See, forgiveness is what they ask for to wipe the slate clean. But Machiavelli understood that clean slates are for fools. The wise keep ledgers. The wise balance accounts. They don't erase history, they use it. He would tell you, never strike out of rage, but never forget who forced your hand. Because rage burns out, but memory endures. That's the difference between vengeance and mastery. Vengeance consumes, mastery refines. Vengeance seeks to destroy what hurt you. Mastery uses it to rebuild something better, stronger, colder. And once you reach that level when you no longer need to react, when your silence becomes strategy, you stop being seen as emotional. You start being seen as inevitable. In every hierarchy, whether it's a kingdom or a company, People test boundaries. They push to see what they can get away with. The more you forgive, the more they push. The more you let it slide, the more you slide into irrelevance. You can't demand respect from those who've learned that you fear conflict. And you can't protect yourself while pretending that mercy will turn snakes into saints. Mercy only works when it's backed by power. Forgiveness only matters when it's offered from strength. Without that, it's not virtue, it's vulnerability. So, you don't forgive to look moral. You forgive, if ever, to make others dependent. And if forgiveness doesn't strengthen your position, then it weakens it. That's the rule. Understand this deeply. The people who wronged you are watching. They're waiting to see whether your boundaries are real or just performance. Every reaction you give is a signal. Every silence is a message. Machiavelli would remind you that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. They believe what they see, not what you say. So if you forgive too quickly, they'll see weakness, not grace. But if you stay composed, distant, strategic, they'll see power. Because fear doesn't come from cruelty, it comes from uncertainty. The person who forgives is predictable. The person who remembers is unreadable. And unreadable people are dangerous. You don't need to announce your strength. You only need to make others question how much you know. You don't need to shout about betrayal. You only need to act like someone who never forgets. That energy, quiet, disciplined, calm, is what makes others hesitate before crossing you again. Forgiveness is noise. Memory is silence. And silence is what unsettles people most. You'll notice this shift the moment you stop explaining yourself. The moment you stop clarifying what you meant. When you start saying less, others start guessing more. They begin to replay their own words in their heads, wondering where they went wrong. That's the psychological advantage of memory. It reverses the power dynamic. Forgiveness makes you harmless. Memory makes you haunting. And when you understand that, you stop chasing closure and start creating consequence. When they try to test you again, and they will, you don't need to fight. You don't even need to confront. You just deny them access. That's the Machiavellian strike. Calm, surgical, final. No anger, no drama, just absence. Because absence is punishment enough for those who once thrived on your attention. They'll say you've become distant. They'll whisper that you've changed. But what's really changed is your value. You're no longer easy to reach, easy to read, or easy to use. Forgiveness makes you predictable, but mystery makes you powerful. So, stop trying to prove you're the better person. You already are, because you're not ruled by impulse anymore. You're ruled by purpose. Let them carry their guilt while you carry your crown. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them miss the version of you who used to explain everything. That person is gone. You've evolved from moral to Machiavellian, from forgiver to foreseer. And in this world, that evolution isn't cruel, it's survival. There's a moment in every life when forgiveness dies, and in its place, clarity is born. You'll feel it quietly, like a tightening in the chest. The final crack in the illusion that goodness will protect you. You'll look at the faces that once deceived you, the voices that once softened your guard, and you'll realize something Machiavelli knew centuries ago. Those who hurt you are not your enemies. They are your education. Forgiveness feels noble, it feels spiritual, but it is often a disguise for fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of being seen as cruel, fear of losing your moral image. The world told you that letting go makes you virtuous, but Machiavelli would whisper that it only makes you predictable. Predictability is the death of power. When you forgive too easily, you teach others exactly how to defeat you. They learn your threshold for pain, your appetite for tolerance, your desperate need to appear good. They see your boundaries as optional, your patience as weakness, your silence as surrender. The weak forgive to feel peaceful. The strong remember to stay prepared. Every betrayal you've ever endured carries intelligence. And the wise man collects that intelligence, like a general studies the field before war. He doesn't forgive and forget. He forgives and records. He studies how the attack came, who was complicit, and what blind spot he missed. He turns every offense into strategy, every pain into foresight. Because forgiveness erases the map. Memory draws the terrain. Look at history. Kingdoms that fell did not fall to their enemies. They fell because they forgot. They trusted alliances that had already betrayed them once. They forgave out of idealism. They confused mercy with security. And as Machiavelli warned, the prince who forgets history invites his own ruin. You don't have to be a prince for that lesson to matter. You only have to be someone who's been deceived, humiliated, or abandoned, and still thought that forgiveness would make it right. It doesn't. It only resets the trap. Forgiveness is emotional. Memory is architectural. Forgiveness builds nothing. Memory builds systems, systems of defense, awareness, timing, and restraint. Forgiveness leaves you exposed. Memory makes you unreadable. So, how do you live by Machiavelli's warning in today's world? You start by refusing to erase what happened. You stop romanticizing healing as forgetting. You begin to see betrayal not as tragedy, but as curriculum. Write it down mentally or literally. Who lied? Who shifted when you needed stability? Who cheered when you fell? Who disappeared when you struggled? These are not coincidences. These are data points. Each one teaches you how human loyalty actually works, how power disguises itself, how masks are worn by the ones closest to you. The world calls it paranoia. Machiavelli calls it realism. People will say, but doesn't holding on make you bitter? No, it makes you precise. Bitterness is emotional fixation. Memory is emotional mastery. One chains you to pain, the other frees you from repetition. Remembering doesn't mean dwelling. It means integrating. It means you no longer need to revisit the wound because the lesson has already been absorbed into your operating system. The pain becomes code silent, automatic, protective. You'll start to notice that the ones who preach forgiveness the loudest are often the ones who benefit from your forgetfulness. They want the ledger wiped clean because they owe too much. But you are done wiping slates. You are done letting offenders rewrite your history. From now on, you don't argue. You don't explain. You don't threaten. You simply remember and act accordingly. Machiavelli taught that the wise ruler inflicts injuries all at once, but gives benefits slowly. In modern terms, this means you respond to betrayal not with rage, but with timing. You don't react, you reposition. You move pieces quietly while they think you're still wounded. You let their comfort become your camouflage, and when you finally act, you do so cleanly. No shouting, no drama, just execution, swift, silent, irreversible. Forgiveness wants to make peace. Memory creates balance. And balance is what power really is. The ability to restore order on your own terms. Understand something. People rarely change. They only adjust their tactics. The liar becomes subtler. The manipulator becomes more polished. The betrayer learns new language. If you forget, you invite an upgraded version of the same betrayal. But if you remember, you evolve faster than they do. The man who forgives without memory is disarmed. The man who remembers without emotion is undefeatable. The first time someone deceives you, it's a test. The second time, it's a pattern. The third time, it's a choice yours. Machiavelli would tell you that to forgive repeatedly is not compassion. It's submission. and the world doesn't respect the submissive. It uses them. You must become the opposite. Controlled, unreadable, untouchable. Stop explaining why you're distant. Stop apologizing for being cautious. Stop letting people shame you for remembering what they did. The guilty always call memory cruelty because it exposes their reflection. Let them talk. Let them call you cold. Cold is not cruelty. Cold is clarity. You've spent enough of your life mistaking warmth for safety. Now it's time to build heat through discipline, not emotion. Because real warmth doesn't come from mercy. It comes from mastery. Mastery over your reactions, your boundaries, your silence. When you master those, forgiveness becomes obsolete. You no longer need to let go. You simply move on in control, unbothered, fully aware. Forgiveness gives them peace. Memory gives you dominance. You'll know you've reached that stage when people who once underestimated you start measuring their words. When your absence starts to make them uncomfortable. When your silence becomes a mirror they can't look into. That's the point. You are no longer reacting to offenses. You're shaping environments. You are no longer trying to be the better person. You've become the stronger one. Forgiveness ends with emotion. Memory begins with structure. Structure is what builds legacies. You cannot build an empire on kindness alone. You build it on understanding of people, of timing, of power. And in that understanding lies your new philosophy. Forgive only when it strengthens your position. Speak only when silence no longer serves you. Trust only when tested by time and consequence. Everything else forget the illusion. Because forgiveness may heal the heart, but it weakens the crown. And the crown must be protected at all costs. If they call you heartless, so be it. The world needs heartless men far more than harmless ones. Heartless doesn't mean unfeeling. It means unmanipulable. It means your emotions are no longer public property. It means your peace is no longer negotiable. Machiavelli would tell you this. Men respect what they fear to lose. So make your memory something they fear. Let your composure make them uneasy. Let your silence make them reconsider every word before it reaches you. Let your existence remind them that betrayal never truly disappears. It just matures into intelligence. The weak forgive because they need to prove they're good. The strong remember because they refuse to be victims again. Forgiveness is temporary relief. Memory is permanent authority. So stand tall in your new clarity. You owe no one an apology for evolving. You owe no one forgiveness for what they consciously did. You owe yourself one promise, never to let the same hand strike you twice. Remember everything, not to stay in the past, but to own the future. Because in the end, history doesn't honor the merciful. It honors the calculated. It remembers not the ones who forgave too much, but the ones who learned so completely that they could never be fooled again. Forgiveness is for the weak. But memory, cold, precise, strategic memory is forever.